over to you, Gunter, and thank you very much for today's coffee talk, and congratulations again on the defence of your PhD.
Thanks.
Wonderful news. So yeah, we look forward to listening in now and seeing how it all began and happened.
Thanks a lot, Carol. Yeah, indeed. So yeah, this is also the motivation of this talk. So we've been thinking to use this occasion to share really fresh experiences on having accomplished a PhD thesis defense, and the topic is basically around what every student hears around the PhD thesis defense. It's you need to fear this is going to be the end, etc. But after accomplishing this, there's a lot of realization that it's indeed what's always mentioned by your supervisors. You need to you need to demonstrate that you are now a scholar among others within a certain discipline. You need to defend your contribution, etc. So that was a motivation, and I wanted to share this specifically in regards to myths, because there are a lot of misconceptions. I myself had prepared a lot of things, and then I read different stories around thesis defenses, and I thought this is a good thing to share with researchers at IVI, specifically with the early stage researchers, but also open up a discussion. So because every thesis defense is different, and also from different supervisors. So let me get started. Yeah, so I basically consolidated 6 typical thesis defense myths. So the source, as I was mentioning, based on information available on the internet when I was preparing, but also from my own experiences and what eventually happened at the thesis defense session. So the first myth is what most people tell you: should fear the thesis defense. It's the worst thing on earth. It's the scariest thing on earth. It's even more dangerous than death itself. So this is not the case. I mean, obviously, because but I should not downplay like it. So what I learned, and you really need to respect that session. It is like a compact 1 to maybe 3 hour session, and you really need to respect it. It is the only session where you have a chance to defend your thesis, and you worked on a thesis like for 3-4 years, or some other occasion 5 years or even more. And you need to appreciate that it's an event that allows you to defend whatever your thesis is, right? So it gives you a setting, a conversation where you can talk freely, right? So that's what I would recommend, not to look at it in a way like, oh, this is the last step. When you screw this up, you're screwed. Like, it's not like that. It's basically the chance to talk about your. The more you come closer to that event, the more you will realize. I myself was really nervous. Was not the case because I was afraid, or I was nervous because of this uncertainty. So I wanted to deliver a good job. I wanted to put my arguments forward, but I didn't know how this would, eventually be shaped. Like, what will be the questions? Will I have a chance, etc.? Am I going to forget something, etc.? And so these were some concerns, but it's okay to be a bit nervous. So it shows that you have respect of this event. The second one is, so this is the other side of the spectrum. Oh, I know my thesis, there is no need for preparation. I myself had this thought as well, like at some stage, not towards the end, though, but I was like, okay, I've written it up, so yeah, I know what's in there, and yeah, let's see how it goes. No, that's a very, very dangerous misconception, because you can't prepare enough. So what I read and what people were telling me, like, you really need to reread your thesis at least once before the session. And that was true. When I was rereading and I came across paragraphs and I was like, oh, I forgot about this argumentation. I forgot this was an interesting reference here, etc. So this can be really important, especially when there's a question coming up and you need to think, oh, what was it? So in my Viva, actually, it happened once. I was not sure how to answer that question. I had to look it up, like, we have the printouts in front of us, and I was, oh yeah, actually, there's the answer. So it was there in the thesis, but I couldn't remember. So that's why it's really, really important. But also in other terms, like you need to have prepared your material, right? So let's say the most important literature, the key literature, it's good to have like as a printout. Organize your notes, and also what's not discussed a lot, you need to dress well, right? So you need to show that you respect the session. So you can't be just showing up in casual attire, I don't know, sweatpants or something. I'm just exaggerating, but it shows that now, oh, this is the session where I want to discuss with those examiners. And yes, the next myth is, yeah, prepare to answer all possible questions. That's pure, like, just from technical sense, it's not possible. Like, on the image there, you see, you can have this big armor, but there's always one question which goes through. So rather, prepare to be prepared for questions, right? So that's what I try to do is, why would you actually want to prepare all questions? It's not a quiz. It's not. It's a conversation. It's about your research. It's about your knowledge contribution. It's it's discussing, right? So there were situations where the examiners, they didn't ask me actually questions. They were like, oh, here on this page when you were talking, discussing this, you decided to do this, etc. Can you comment on this? Right? So they're opening up conversations. They're not like, oh, you're choosing this method, but as far as I know, this method is not suitable for this. Why did you choose it? Like, it's not like that. If they want to open, they want to check your rationale behind it. So that's why I was like, okay, I need to prepare prepared for those kind of questions. How do I respond? So obviously questions could I answer it directly because I know some question I wouldn't know. So how do I respond to those? Some questions I may not be sure how to respond. So how do I respond to those, etc. Or there was one or two situations where I was like, oh, I need to check that quickly in my thesis, right? So and then that's what my response. I was like, let me verify this quickly, or let me have a look at the section again quickly, right? And then that helped a lot because it's conversation. It's not like, yeah, you have 10 seconds now to answer your questions. It's not like that. It's a purely conversational basis. Yeah, and what what I really heard a lot is the examiners are your enemy, like as in they are your opponents. It's them against the student, and that's why it's called defense, right? So I can't follow this. It's I couldn't disagree more on this because, as I was saying, it's a conversation, and those are experienced academics who just want to check and verify. I was explaining in the introduction. What is your knowledge contribute? What is your originality? Why is it significant? Tell us about it. So what's the argumentation? What's your thesis actually around this? So that's why it's called thesis. So what is your hypothesis in this? So let's talk about this. It's not like, yeah, look, I have 10 questions now. If you fail to answer 2 of those, the session is failed. You failed to 5. So it's not like that. So it's not a black and white. And yes, what else? Have an answer to every question. That relates back to being prepared to all questions. So you don't need to have an answer to all questions. It's not like, oh, I couldn't answer this. Oh no, one more, then it's a failed session. So it's not like that. And what you could do is to anticipate different aspects, right, of the thesis that might come up as a question, for example. And what's also very, I think it's essential in that session is you need to be honest, right? So if you are not sure, you don't know, tell it. Like, just don't talk around it. So you just tell them, yeah, I don't know it. And then, but provide why you don't know it, etc. So it's again like coming back, it's conversational nature. And I really doubt that at that stage every student would know what's going on in their topic. And in that question, there needs to be at least some aspect that you can relate to. And last but not least, also what some misconceptions, all thesis defense are the same. You know, structure-wise, time-wise, questions are the same. It's going to be the same typical corrections at the end. It's like, no worries. So if you just check what's going, what's the typical questions are, you're going to be fine. No, it's not. So as you know, we had 3 thesis defense in the last 2 weeks. And of course, we talked to each other as the students who went through the defense, how it went, etc. And we realized that for all of 3 of us, it was very, very different, right? You know, the examiners, it starts with the examiners. It starts with the topics. So the different topics, there are different view on the topics. They have a different academic expertise. They have a different, you know, personalities to approach questioning, etc. And also what's said to be typical is the fact that, yeah, usually it goes chapter by chapter, right? So they ask the chapter first and the second chapter questions, etc. But it's not necessarily the case. In other examinations, they might just go directly to your contribution and then ask you, let's figure out how it came to this contribution, how your argumentation, where it started, etc. So that's also a current misconception. And yes, and that's about it. So I just consolidate these 6 myths here again listed, and I open up the discussion. You know, do you have comments, questions? Do you know other myths from your experience, from your students, or students there? You know, what kind of questions would you have? Yeah, thanks.
Thanks very much, Goldkin. That was really interesting.
Yeah, that was very informative.
Thanks, yeah.
Any questions, comments? Welcome, guys, from anyone online or in the room, or anyone that has to yet to do one.
I will write down all myths.
So I know everything. I know every session is different, right? But did I read correctly? Yours was almost 3 hours. Is that somewhat typical?
Oh, yes. It was. So the chairperson took the time. It was like 2 hours and 37 or 34. I don't remember actually. So it was some exact timing. He told me at the end. And yeah, just 2 comments on that. First one is, so I had a discussion with my chairperson before the Viva session and the other day, and then he told me that typically it's around 2 hours. So it's 1.5 or 2.5. So that was totally fine. And it totally depends on you know, the nature of the conversation. And I believe, you know, my second comment on this is that in my case, it pretty much was because I had written so much, so many things down, and then, you know, the examiners had the opportunity to assess a lot of things. And we went sequentially, by the way, so first chapter, second chapter, and so on. And I believe if we were stuck in quite for some time in my methodology section, so that took some time. But another section was like just 2 basic questions. But generally, I would have thought that, yeah, if it would be just half the amount of words I had written, it will certainly be reflected with the defense session. The amount took time.
Did you get a break?
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's a funny thing. Funny story, actually. I didn't ask by myself, but the examiners were like, "Oh, okay. I think we will need a break," because apparently they you know, they saw that I was a bit exhausted and I was looking tired a bit, right? So they asked, oh, do you want a break, or let's have a break? So we had a break. So that was like, I don't remember actually, around chapter 3 out of 7. And it took like almost 10 minutes. Yeah, it was a good break.
Very good.
What was really helpful is, so my Viva was in person. So the School of Business offered me to have the room inspected before the session, and we informed the chairperson about it, and the chairperson was willing to join. So I met him there before the Viva. That was really good. And yeah, and also to check some, technical things. And ironically, on the session, it didn't start well. I remember the sharing was not working properly for 5 minutes, I think. Was not really a good start, but I didn't mind because we didn't even start talking yet with the examiners. And they wouldn't judge me just because of my sharing abilities, sharing ability.
So good, I can hear Michaela speaking. Can you hear me?
Hey, Michaela, yeah.
Hi. Yeah, congratulations again.
Thanks a lot.
Great achievement. And so can you tell us if you did the mock Viva and how helpful was that, if you did one?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that. That's something you should really do, like here on myth, the second myth. Really take your time to have this introductory presentation prepared really well. Like, I mean, even the slides, no typos, page numbering consistent, and the flow. It must be really like, this is the moment you need to shine. This is the moment where you deliver your main strengths, right in the beginning. This is setting the scene. And we did a mock Viva, and we received very good feedback, and we did some revisions, and those revisions were, as far as I could tell, perceived well. There were not many questions on the presentation itself, but some introductory questions from the examiners. They were referring back to the presentation, like, they were like, oh, as you were telling in your presentation, as you said in your presentation, etc., etc. Can you tell us more about ABC? So it is very important to set the scene and to bring forward your main strengths again. Hello. Oh, I saw it. Yeah, just saw.
Yeah, good again. Can you hear me?
Yes, Manzura.
All right. So the defense activity is something like I had mine 10 years back. I don't see any change in that in the current days as well, because this activity evolves around certain items, and those items need to be completed to have a successful defense. So I think we had discussed, once you came back from your defense, we had a discussion on it. So let me ask you this question. What was the biggest fear you had on the defense day?
Oh, yes, thanks. Yeah, that's bringing me back to myth number 1. The biggest fear was the fact that some elements in my thesis would not be sufficient, as in, to, let's say, to appropriately accomplish a certain step, to do, let's say, 2 case studies. And I did 1, right? And that could be some topic for discussion. Why did you want? And then maybe some conclusion. Oh, we think you may need another case study here to, to substantiate your argument better. So that was my biggest fear, that it was not sufficient in terms of having tools and methods utilized, because that it would implicate that you know, they would need some major revision to do. But luckily we had some discussion around this, but it was more around, again, what I said beforehand, you know, just to check the rationale on my decisions, right? So it was not to check, oh, let us check how many case studies there are. Oh, there is just one case, but it's a huge single case study, right? So just a justification, and it's suitable, right? So that's what was you know, the core in the conversation, because that is addressing their aim, right? So what the examiners want to achieve, they want to achieve that the student is able to demonstrate that the contribution is novel, etc., and that the decisions on the research along the research method are objective, transparent, and reasonable. So that's what, and I demonstrated that it was indeed reasonable, right, to opt to this. But again, you know, you never know, and then
yeah.
Gultekin, thanks. You were talking about, of course, the myth and that every Viva is different. But also when you were talking about, I see also common points. So I would like to understand, because there are some, I think there are some points that, and what you already knew and you have been told, and then you really verified that was what was told. So not only the myths, but the things that really were kind of, and the commonalities with other Vivas, but also something that you heard maybe since the beginning of your PhD journey, and really it happened what was told you from the beginning.
Yes, I agree. Like at the core, there are commonalities, right? So as I just mentioned, very, very important is original contribution. Where do you position your research or your contribution in which wider discourse, and in what kind of discipline is it positioned? So this is, I think, is one of the essential things checked at the Viva. And from the beginning of my PhD and reflecting to the Viva now, what was verified, I think, is the literature gap, right? So in the beginning, it's very, very important to identify a literature gap. And I remember we had, I don't know, at least 5 questions evolving around the literature gap, right? So 1, 2, just purely from how I could, you know, how did I identify the research gaps, you know, the methodology in my literature review, and then why is it a literature gap, etc. So this was verified at the end. Another thing might be, yes, simple technical questions. Yes, so I remember, so Marcus and Maria, so they were telling me also, you need to be really consistent in your argumentation. You need to be really careful in how you articulate yourself, etc. So that was also verified. So there were questions like, oh no, so some mistakes at the end of the thesis. I missed to correct the fact that there were there's only one case study, single case study, right? So, and there were still some sections where I was talking about 2 case studies, so it was inconsistent. So and they immediately spot those things, these like essential things, you can't fool them. And what else? There were actually many things. So overall there were like 35 questions, I think. Oh yeah, there was also a question, basic question on what does this abbreviation mean? So I had a list of abbreviations, but I forgot 1 or 3, 1, 2, 3 abbreviations, and I couldn't remember it. So this is a really small thing maybe, but it's very important when you talk about, that was in the literature section part, you know, it was the abbreviation of a certain theory, and it's not good that you don't remember it. You know, there's a purpose for that abbreviation list. So make sure, guys, you don't miss or any abbreviation in that list. So again, comes back to consistency and also terminology wise. So there was a discussion on asymmetric versus inconsistency. I was not really sure, or I didn't spend that much time on thinking about it, but during the discussion, I was like, okay, yeah, that's actually correct. There's a huge difference, right? So terminology is essential.
Okay, I think we're just nearly there, guys, with 1 minute to 2. So we'll leave it there. Gultigan, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for joining. I have a last slide there. Gultigan, I think if you just want to share to anyone new online, just as a reminder, to keep in touch for our upcoming coffee talks. And
oh yes, I just added this here. So IVI will be at the National Manufacturing Supply Chain Exhibition in Dublin in 24th of May. So I will be presenting a project of IVI. So this is in collaboration with those event organizers, just to let you know. And yes, Carol, this.
Yeah, thanks, Gultigan. Yes, so just to mention to anyone new online today, just to keep in touch and sign up for our newsletter, get in touch with us here with any questions or Gultigan if there's any further questions. Thank you for joining. Hopefully you can join us next week. We have our coffee talk continued with Jim Klein from CGI Technology and Solutions. So we look forward to that. So thank you all and congratulations again to Gultigan. Thanks all very much.